Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Comic Source Comic Boom collaboration. It's time for the DC Spotlight for the week of July 6, 2021. Tons of books this week.
Tons.
So many books. It frustrates me a little bit because last week we only had 4, although they were super long. And then this week they dump so many books on us. I'm fondly remembering those days when people were talking about the DeMatteis. DC's only putting out 6 books. They're going to stop making print comics. Clearly not. Look at all these books this week. So we should probably dive right in. And with so many books, I almost don't even give usually we talk about our overall feel for the week. I don't even know that I can't. There's so many books I don't even know that I can give an overall because some are great and some aren't. And it's kind of all over the place. So
it is. It's kind of hard to process it all at once. Maybe I think we'll get maybe a better idea once we start talking about it and we'll collect our thoughts a little bit. But
so let's kick it off with I guess Crime Syndicate number 5, which I thought was, I don't know, it wasn't one of my favorites. This series has been a little inconsistent for me, but there's a lot of good here. I'm just not sure I'm getting it, and you see, and throughout the series, really, you've seemed to have a better pulse on what writer Andy Schmidt is trying to do. We're going to have Andy on soon to talk about the series, and that might help me as well. But we'll start there. Issue number 5. It's written by Andy Schmidt. The pencils are by Kieran McCown. Inks by Dexter Vines. Colors by Steve Olaf. Letters by Rob Lee. And then there is a backup feature which has the origin of Johnny Quick that's written by Andy Schmidt. Brian Hitch is the artist for that, with Alex Sinclair on colors and Rob Lee on letters. So a lot of action in this issue. What did you think, Rocky?
Man, I actually quite enjoyed this. I actually think this is arguably maybe one of the more enjoyable issues so far. I'm finally starting to get a handle, I think, on the world that Andy Schmidt is building, because early on I had a bias in favor of preferring sort of like the Grant Morrison take of the Crime Syndicate from that classic Earth 2 hardcover that Morrison did back, this got to be 20 years ago or a long time ago anyway. But I'm starting to get a feel for it here, and it's clear that Andy Schmidt he's really building in short order here. I mean, this is only the 5th issue out of 6. He's really building, very much building a world here, and this is world building, and we get to see the Legion of Justice in this issue, as is right on this gorgeous cover, the Legion of Justice, and basically we left off last issue where essentially Owlman and Donna Troy, Superwoman, are trying to recruit Ultraman to their cause because there's sort of like a meta-human war going on, or a meta-human civil war. They're with Lex Luthor trying to recruit as many meta-humans to his cause of justice versus Ultraman, or versus Owlman and the Crime Syndicate, who are trying to recruit as many to their cause. And this is quite a lot is at stake here, and I got to tell you, a lot happens here. I mean, I got to give, on the one hand, I give Andy Schmidt a lot of credit, writer Andy Schmidt a lot of credit, because he crams a lot of story in here, and a lot happens. I mean, we get very interesting takes on Harley Quinn, who is actually Red Hood. We get the Tower Titan instead of Wonder Woman's old villain there. She's known as the Tower Titan, and then we get all these different takes on these different characters, which are very interesting, very intriguing, because we have Ultraman and Owlman and Superwoman essentially attacking the I guess you could call the Legion of Justice satellite. And we were wondering last issue of what Emerald Knight's allegiances were, because Emerald Knight had joined the Legion of Justice. He still appears to be fighting with the Legion of Justice alongside Sinestro, and in this issue, it's interesting that a member of the Crime Syndicate apparently dies, and it looks like Johnny Quick at one point actually kills Johnny, or it looks like Emerald Knight ends up killing Johnny Quick, and also taking out Atomica. But yet, I still think that's misdirection. I still think that there's something else amiss here, something else at play. But I'm really enjoying the interaction. I'm asking the right questions, and even though a lot's happening, and I'll be interested to hear your viewpoint on this, Jace. Even though a lot's happening, I'm actually intrigued by this. I like the fact that we're sort of thrown in the thick of things, and we're meeting all these so-called heroes slash characters we're accustomed to being villains. Suddenly they're on the side of justice, and I like this meta-human war. There's a lot at stake. There's a lot of action going on. I love the rapport between Ultraman and Donna Troy. Donna Troy, thinks Ultraman is kind of an idiot, and Ultraman is just hoping to have some intimacy with Donna Troy because she wants to have a child, and she's not impressed with Ultraman's intelligence, but she likes. You can already see the rumblings of maybe some of her attraction potentially to Owlman, because Owlman is clearly the brains of the operation. You get to see Johnny Quick's background here in the backup, and also the fact that Johnny Quick took out his own parents, and you can tell he's definitely psychologically screwed up. You can really see how the crime syndicate is the worst of the worst in terms of the criminals on Earth 3, and it's. I really like this. Now, there is some overlap with Crime Syndicate and issue 5 of Suicide Squad, which is a very interesting overlap, and we'll get to that when we talk about Suicide Squad. But I really like the world building that Andy Schmidt has done here, and the action sequences and who dies and who gets injured, and the Ultraman versus Vandal Savage. So much happens, man. I just don't want to ruin it. I love there's a great, what I view, some of these 2-page spreads are just fantastic. And just this all-out battle sequence. This is the stuff that I actually want to read in the pages of Justice League. This is action-packed stuff here. I'm really enjoying this. This is just plain fun. And I love the last-minute appearance at the end. Ultraman is about to take out Lex Luthor, only he is stopped by this Earth 3's version of Kara Zor-El. And wow, I got to tell you, I'm really intrigued to see what the future holds here. This issue was called Swift Vengeance. And yeah, man, I'm really curious to know what you thought of this, Jace.
Yeah, I think it's still not really resonating for me. And I had talked previously after the first couple issues of really looking forward to meeting Alexander Luthor and hoping that he would be kind of a touchstone character for me. Because he was the classic version is so heroic, and that's kind of always been my gateway into the Crime Syndicate world, because I have been a fan of Earth 3 and these characters in the past. It's kind of tropey now, but when you take these heroes and we get the evil versions, like I said, it's tropey now. It's been done 1,000 times, but back when they were first created, it hadn't. It was a little more fresh. And the problem is here and we know that this was an editorial directive for Andy Schmidt, that, hey, this is a new version of these characters. This is a new version of the Crime Syndicate. It's not the one that you know. So without the nostalgia to pull me in, I felt like, okay, I need a good Alexander, a very heroic Alexander Luthor that I can invest in, a character that I can care about, where that'll be my kind of gateway into the story. The problem is the Alexander Luthor that we're getting is not really resonating with me. He doesn't necessarily seem that heroic. Not that he's a villain by any means, but he also hasn't seemed very capable so far. He gets tricked into bringing Owlbots aboard the satellite, the Legion of Justice satellite, and that compromises their defense, and they end up invaded by the Crime Syndicate. So I'm still struggling to find my way into the story, and the action is there, and it's certainly interesting seeing these different versions, like you mentioned, of Harley Quinn, who's Red Hood, of Vandal Savage, who has a different name and has some technology from Apocalypse, which is very interesting to me. So there are interesting characters here, a different version of Giganta and all that. How Lonar, the version of Vandal Savage, got this Apocalypse technology, we don't know. He rides on a metal, like, robotic horse. I mean, they're just cool. It's cool to see these kind of different versions, but I'm still struggling to find my way in. To my knowledge, and I could be wrong, There hasn't been an Earth 3 version of Kara Zor-El, of Supergirl, so she's got the same emblem. She's got that Ultraman emblem. So does that mean she'll be a villain? Will she be a hero? I mean, my guess is she's going to be a villain. So it is fun and it is over the top. I just wonder if it's going to resonate with people, because you got to care about the characters first, and that's my problem. Although the characters are interesting, I haven't found a way to care about these characters yet. And so that's been my struggle. As far as the backup story with Johnny Quick, it's pretty much sort of what I expected. I think I said it in the first issue. What is this, like a hillbilly or a white trash version of Johnny Quick?
Yeah.
We see this origin, and that's exactly what it is. And again, that's just not something that's going to interest me. I mean, it's fine. He obviously underwent a lot of abuse at the hands of his older brothers and his father, and a lot of trauma, and it explains why he's so depraved and has killed so many people. But again, that's kind of tropey too. If anything, the most interesting character is Owlman, which, do we really need another version of Batman? But that he is the most interesting. The Ultraman here doesn't seem to be particularly smart. The Superwoman is different, a little more psychopathic, I guess you'd say. But I guess you could make that argument for all of the characters. Atomika, she does survive the... not that it was an attempt by Emerald Knight to kill her and Johnny Quick. It was a little bit inadvertent, but she does survive it. We see her sitting on a little, either a sheaf of weed or a blade of grass or a weed or something there. Mm-hmm. I don't actually. I think it is misdirection. I think you mentioned as well. I don't think Johnny Quick's really dead. I think he'll heal from whatever was done to him. So yeah, there's a lot of good ideas, but it feels more plot driven than character driven, and maybe it needs to be because we don't know these characters. But that's kind of the problem. So to tell such a big story with these characters, and I don't know what the solution would have been, to kind of introduce this version of the Crime Syndicate and let us know the characters being introduced.
It's unfortunate there's only 6 issues. If you had more time, but I like the fact that I just love. It's just very intriguing. I love the head canon that it inspires in me. In terms of I imagine what the origins might be, and even the fact that there's the Jester, and the Jester is Earth 3's Joker, and Red Hood, Harley Quinn, wants to take out Ultraman, or wants to take out Owlman as revenge for what he did to Jester. And she says Jester's still alive, but Owlman thinks Jester's dead. And we don't even know who the Jester is. And we got these editorial notes referring to comic books we'll never read because they only existed in Earth 3. And so I think Andy Schmidt is having fun here. And if you really, I think if you really allow yourself to get delved into this series, I think there is some fun and some imagination to be had. And this thing can only grow the mythology, so we at least have that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I do wonder about if this could have been more of a slow build, and more of start off with sort of character pieces, and he is doing his best, right? Because a lot of each issue so far has sort of spotlighted one character of the Crime Syndicate or another, especially in the backups. But yeah, I think just a little more room, maybe a 12 issue. But the market just won't bear that right now, to be honest with you. So it's a struggle.
I am going to throw in here, because we are going to be reviewing Suicide Squad number 5. In Suicide Squad number 5, it's been revealed that Amanda Waller is spying on all of the Earths of the multiverse, and Earth 3 is one of them. And she's got Bloodsport spying on what's going on in Earth 3, and that leads to an altercation and an interaction with Ultraman in the pages of Suicide number 5 that we will be reviewing. And so there is some expansion of the Earth 3 mythology that I think has taken place in the pages of Suicide Squad that I think is quite intriguing as well, as we'll get to.
Yeah, unfortunately, all the Suicide Squad issue did was remind me of Future State Suicide Squad, which I didn't particularly like, but we might as well jump into it. I mean, it's titled Earth 3 Part 1, from writer Robbie Thompson, Dexter Soy, Eduardo Pansica, Julio Ferreira, and Joe Prado are listed as artists. Alex Sinclair does the colors, and Wes Abbott does the letters. And it is Earth 3 Part 1, and we do get kind of a newer, updated version of Bloodsport, which I guess, with the Suicide Squad movie coming up, it's not a big surprise. But at least we do get a little bit of a flashback for his origin and his old look, how he looked originally, which wasn't much of a costume. He just had this red bandana, like covering half his face, with the tied in the back with these long trailing pieces of red cloth, and then camo pants, a black tank top, and a giant gun, basically. And he took on Superman. He'll be played by, I think, Idris Elba in the Suicide Squad movie that's coming up from James Gunn. So again, not a surprise that he plays a role here. But yeah, we find out that he's basically been sent out by Amanda Waller to recruit all across the multiverse. I'm going to kind of leave it alone and not break it down too much to talk about the fact that this is really some power creep for Amanda Waller, that all of a sudden she has technology where she can send somebody hopping across the multiverse. And I don't like it, and I'm going to leave it there, and I'm not going to analyze it more, because anybody who's listening to this podcast knows I don't like Amanda Waller. And I think leveling her up like that is, I don't like it. And I think it would have been suited to bring in another character to do that. I do like the look of Bloodsport. His helmet, which is like half skull, half, I don't know, just devoid of any sort of features. So he does look a lot more menacing. Other than that, it's kind of interesting. There's not actually a whole lot of plot development. It's kind of a one note issue. It's narrated by Bloodsport, and he's just talking about the fact that he's been sent out to recruit. Other than that, we hear that Amanda kind of cracked down on all the members of the Suicide Squad that were left back on that are in our multiverse because of what happened when them letting Red X escape, which we saw last issue. And she found out that they were, talking behind her back, and now they've scanned every inch of the prison, and nobody's going to be able to talk without Amanda Waller hearing it anymore. We know Rick Flag escaped somehow. And we get a little motivation for why Bloodsport allows himself to be sent around the multiverse to recruit for Amanda. She's promised that eventually, if he recruits enough people, that he'll be freed, and he knows that she's lying through her teeth. Well, first of all, if Amanda Waller's lips are moving, she's lying. Second of all, he doesn't really care, because he always takes advantage of going to these different Earths to revisit his brother who died, Mickey, who is the whole reason he became Bloodsport. And so that's kind of his personal motivation behind doing it. But yeah, we do get some of Earth 3 here. We get some context. We see some events that happen in the Earth 3 miniseries that are referenced here. So all that still works really well. But like I said, at the end of the day, it reminds me that, hey, the Earth 3 or the future state Earth 3 Suicide Squad storyline still took place, and we're still marching toward it, which a lot of these books are. And I've said it a bunch in these DC Spotlights. I hope we're going to veer away from that. But this is a well-paced issue. Robbie Thompson is giving us a really cool and fresh Suicide Squad story. Peacemaker is kind of he's the first member of my Amanda Waller hate club, because he appears to despise her just as much as I do, and he just uses her as a means to an end. So glad to have Peacemaker on my side, and Amanda Waller kind of puts him in his place when he speaks out against her in typical Amanda Waller fashion. She's using a bazooka when a fly swatter would do. So that's pretty interesting. And at the end of the day, when Bloodsport calls in for the big gun, when he's facing off against Ultraman, thinking, okay, the big gun being a kryptonite gun, and that would work against just about every Superman in the multiverse, but obviously not here. We know that it's sort of backwards. Ultraman craves kryptonite the way a junkie craves their next fix, and it actually powers them up. So how this will play out over, and I think this is supposed to be a 3-issue arc, how it's all going to play out, and what ideas Amanda Waller gets in this arc, and how that leads into the future state will be interesting to see. And like I said, hopefully we'll avoid it. So it's, despite the fact that it's Amanda Waller, I mean, it's a Suicide Squad book, I got to expect some Amanda Waller, a character that I don't care for. Robbie Thompson has been doing a really great job, and this is interesting. And Rocky's right, it can build off of what Andy Schmidt is doing in the pages of Crime Syndicate. So
Well,
What do you think, Rocky?
I got to tell you, I absolutely love how this builds up the potential for Suicide Squad as being an even more interesting story, because we all know the story of, we all know the general plot line of any Suicide Squad story arc. It's Amanda Waller putting bombs in the heads of various heroes and villains to control what they do. I like the fact that the playing field is now the entire multiverse. She now has spies like Bloodsport that can go and literally recruit. She has the entire multiverse to recruit potential members for the Suicide Squad. And I think that is really, really cool, because one of the things that DC has always, one of the weaknesses of the DC universe in general is that it's failed miserably in the last 20 years to take advantage of the rich characters available in the 52 Earths of the multiverse, or in this case, the larger, even larger omniverse. And this is a great comic book now to potentially allow, so we have at least one comic that will let us do that. So I really like that. I particularly like the Bloodsport is a really great character here. We got some fairly decent character work here. And there's a minor little continuity glitch, and that minor continuity glitch is that at the time that Bloodsport encounters Ultraman, he could not possibly have known they were called the Crime Syndicate, because they weren't formally a team yet. Because if you actually look at the timing, it was just after the Starro thing. They weren't known. I don't even think they were known as the Crime Syndicate. They're still right in the middle of a civil war with Lex Luthor, and that hasn't even played itself out yet. But that's a minor nitpick. Overall, I really like the character work here. Writer Robbie Thompson impresses me. Dexter Soy, I know it's him and some other artists. Really good job. I like the inclusion of Black Siren. I know fans of. I'm not a big fan of the CW Arrow series, but it's nice to get a callback of some characters from the CW show that might bring in some new readers. I think that there's a lot of potential here. It was a laugh out loud moment for me where Bloodsport thought that Kryptonite would have an impact on Ultraman. It's also interesting that we're wondering what impact that death metal had on the memories of various characters. I actually think that I'm surprised Amanda Waller is not familiar with Ultraman. Because I would have thought that she was a little bit more familiar with the workings of the multiverse prior to death metal, but maybe she was, and maybe she doesn't remember it. I don't know, but it is interesting that more and more of this multiverse, everybody knows there's a multiverse now in this infinite frontier, and it's really interesting in terms of where things are headed. I'm having a blast with this. We know that Amanda Waller is slowly going to be working toward creating a Superman for Earth 3 with Connor Kent, and this is the machinations of that, the early rise of that, which, as you said, we know that from Future State, and unfortunately, because we know that, it might take away a little bit from the story, but it's still a pretty fun story in the reading of it for me. So I had a lot of fun with this issue, man. I just this is fun. This is what I want to read DC. I want more of this type of story myself.
Yeah, I wonder. You talk about being able to, with Amanda Waller, whether you agree with the level up in her power and her pool of people to pull from. Because I agree, I love the multiverse of DC. I love how there's all these crazy characters from different places. It'd be great to see them show up in the pages of Suicide Squad. But for me, having them show up just to be cannon fodder and killed off, I have mixed feelings about that. It would be great to see some of these characters that we don't usually get to see, but not if they're just going to show up to get killed off. So I don't know. I guess we'll see.
A double-edged sword, yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about Swamp Thing next, because this sort of has a Suicide Squad tie-in as well. Because I guess DC just hates me. They want to give me as much Amanda Waller as they can. So, Swamp Thing, rather, number 5. Ron V is the writer. John McCrea is the guest artist for this issue. Mike Spicer on colors. Aditya Bidikar on letters. Survivor Bomb. Pretty interesting one of issue. Kick us off, Rocky. What did you think?
Yeah, I'm just at first I think this is the first issue. The first 4 issues, I was very, very impressed. This is the first issue where I had to read this about 3 or 4 times to really get a handle on it. I mean, the idea, you recall in the first issue when we were introduced to the Pale Rider, I was really impressed with how Ram V sort of created the theme, the idea that these were bad ideas, and the pale wanderer, not the pale rider. So apologies to Clint Eastwood, but the pale wanderer talked about these, a bad idea. Bad ideas tend to linger, and Ram V really builds on that. And the premise of this stars Constantine, and I don't know a lot about Constantine lore, but one of the friends of Constantine, the Sierra woman, she ends up creating some sort of, I guess, potion for her friend Nigel, and he takes it, and they're in London, and unfortunately they're near an unexploded bomb, Nazi bomb from World War II. And this Nazi bomb, there's a lot of metaphor in this story. This Nazi bomb embodies the bad idea of fascism and Nazism, and that attracts the Green, that attracts Levi Kamei of the Green, and it's really about, it's called Survivor Bomb, and it's really about what do you do with bad ideas? Is humanity doomed to keep repeating past mistakes of embracing bad ideas like Nazism? I think Ram V has something to say with this story. It didn't quite translate as well as I would have liked for me. I thought this was a messy tale, and I think that messiness was reinforced by artist John McCrea, who, by the way, 9 times out of 10, I love John McCrea's art. I'm not sure to what extent it really works for me here. I missed Mike Perkins' art, if I'm brutally honest. But Mike Perkins did do the cover along with Mike Spicer. And overall here, I thought this was interesting. I liked the attempt. I was going to give Ram V credit because he's not afraid of really delving into some important themes, and he's not afraid to delve into some deep writing, and he always has something to say. I think that he wasn't quite as successful as I would have hoped in this particular issue, and I didn't even quite understand what Swamp Thing did at the end. Was he working? Was it all in his mind, or he somehow seemed to he took this bomb that was going to explode, because apparently this bomb, it was such a powerful bad idea of Nazism that it could possibly explode because of this. I didn't quite understand it. I have to admit, but I could kind of see where he was going for thematically, but I thought this was an unnecessary detour from the cliffhanger in issue 4, where we were getting the Suicide Squad involved and Amanda Waller was going to get involved. And I think this was kind of a little bit of it sort of took me out of where I saw the story going, and this seemed to be an unnecessary distraction. It was the same theme of dealing with a bad idea, but an unnecessary one, and it sort of took me out of the story of the first 4 issues a little bit, and but still it is linked thematically to the first issue. But this was a little bit of a disappointment for me, but I still enjoyed it. But what do you think? Good idea or bad idea, Jace, to pick this up?
So I've talked about the first 4 issues and how the technically a very good comic, but then I'm not a big Swamp Thing guy, and I was gonna jump off. But then I heard John McCrea. John was on the show not too long ago and told us about how he was filling in for an issue on Swamp Thing and getting to draw John Constantine. So I've been looking forward to this, and for me it didn't disappoint, but I could see why it would, because you're right. It is a little bit of a detour, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. And where I look at where some people could be disappointed is the fact that you only get 8 issues of this series. And so does Ram V have the space? Is he losing out on some real estate of the main story he wants to tell? But for me, this kind of harkened back to, if we're talking about a Swamp Thing ongoing, and you had those long threads that were running through those stories that were a little more long tail, but then every once in a while you would get a story where Swamp Thing just had to solve a crime or was dealing with some criminals, where it wasn't necessarily part of the main story, but it gave you a richness, and it established the world, and it helped about the motivations and the characterization of Swamp Thing. And I feel like this issue does the same. Because it shows who Levi is. It's kind of like the status quo. Okay, if Levi is now Swamp Thing, Levi Kamei, then this is the sort of Swamp Thing that he'll be. These are the things he's going to be able to do. And then having Constantine show up, and I very much like the idea that this unexploded bomb was sort of it was this gestation of the idea of Nazism and fascism that was infecting things around it. And I took it as the way Swamp Thing needed to solve the problem was the bomb was always meant to explode and it never did. And so it was slowly giving out its evil, right? Like it was kind of seeping out.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas he takes it to an uninhabited area where no one's around and, explodes it. And that's the way to finally destroy it and keep it from impacting. Whether this will, in fact, tie into the longer story because maybe Levi himself is infected by some ideas of Nazism or fascism, that could be a way that it could tie in. Yeah. So I thought the story was interesting, and like you said, Ramvi always has ulterior motives and stories to tell. But for me, and seeing John Constantine show up, and him and Swamp Thing have a long history from Justice League Dark and whatnot, and John Constantine made his first appearance, in a Swamp Thing comic. So their relationship goes back a long way, and so it's always great to see them together. But for me, where this issue shines the most is in the John McCrea art, because as much as I like what Mike Perkins does, to me, McCrea's art is more organic, and maybe it's because it's not quite as detailed that I get that feeling of a little bit of a softer line, and it feels a little more natural with McCrea's art. And so I also really love the way that John McCrea draws John Constantine. And this is only I think he had said he'd drawn him only twice before, and just like a couple panels each time. And so him getting to go crazy with Constantine, with the stubble, with the trench coat, with the rumpled look and the cigarette and whatnot, it's great. It's great to see. And I think McCrea, the fact that he's having fun here is fantastic. I particularly, my favorite panel in the entire book is where John Constantine is looking up at Swamp Thing, who's towering over him, and Swamp Thing basically calls him a troublemaker. I just love that scene. There it is there. Because you are John Constantine, troublemaker. I mean, it's fantastic. That panel is beautiful. So I absolutely love the art. I thought it did a great job of kind of conveying, for me, the more natural and organic feel of Swamp Thing than Mike Perkins' art has done. And that's nothing to take away from what Mike Perkins has done, because his art is very detailed. But for me, sometimes a little bit of a softer feel, a little bit less detail in the background can actually add more to the story. So yeah, I actually enjoyed this issue a lot. And then at the end, we do get, I mentioned it tying into Swamp Thing, and we saw in the pages of Suicide Squad how Amanda Waller is out there looking to capture Swamp Thing, and we see her on a mission with Peacemaker here, and they're basically dropping some bait for Swamp Thing, trying to capture him. So how that'll all play out, I guess we'll see. And this is not a surprise to anybody. We've talked about it before with the Suicide Squad movie coming up. They are just everywhere. And it's not that I necessarily mind that, the Suicide Squad, it's just the Amanda Waller aspect that I have more of a problem with. It's just, man, Amanda Waller overload. When does the movie come out? It can't come out soon enough so we can stop seeing so much Amanda Waller.
I can't even remember. I just watched the third trailer again, but I never paid attention.
Suicide Squad 2021 film, August 6th. So we got about a month.
Yeah, well, so and the month of August too, we're going to be getting a lot of every DC comic has a Suicide Squad variant cover. So keep an eye out for that for any Suicide Squad fan out there.
Yep. All right, well, let's move on. We have Batman Secret Files: The Signal. It's written by writer Tony Patrick, who I'm not familiar with at all. Christian Duce is the artist. Luis Guerrero does the colors and world design on letters. And this is basically a Signal book, a Duke Thomas book. And if you're not familiar with Duke Thomas, if you don't have a good understanding of his history and what he did with the We Are Robin group and all those, you may be a little lost. And I'm sort of in that book. And this book had me wondering about Duke Thomas and wondering about what Scott Snyder's original plans were for him. When he was introduced, everybody's like, oh, here we go with another Robin. and Snyder did come out and say that he never planned on Duke Thomas being Robin. He's the signal, and we've seen it various times where Batman has said you are the daytime Bat family person, right? Like all the rest of us work at night. You're the daytime guy. I can't imagine that crime is that much less during the daytime in Gotham City that one guy's enough. You know, you got 20 people at night, one guy during the day, the signal.
Yeah.
So that's interesting to me. And I will admit, like, if their plan for this Batman Secret Files Signal book was to get people interested in Duke Thomas, I will admit it did work on me. I realized I don't know enough about Duke Thomas, or I've forgotten what I've read because it frankly was probably forgettable. And so I do feel like, well, maybe I need to go back and refresh on who Duke Thomas is. But the other part of it, you know, the more I thought about it, I don't know that it's ever been well established. Like I feel like Snyder introduced him, but I don't think he ever did with him what he necessarily intended to. I feel like we didn't get a good handle on who Duke Thomas was supposed to be. And since he hasn't had necessarily his own series since then, like, is it established who he is and how he, like, I read this issue and I don't even know if the characterization of Duke Thomas is accurate or not, because I feel like I don't know who he is, despite the fact that he's been around for several years now. So maybe that's the whole point, that DC's doing this, saying, hey, is this going to sell? Could we do a Duke Thomas series? I mean, the issue doesn't even end. We get a to be continued. So yeah, I'm not sure how to feel about it. I sort of like it. I like the ideas and I like a lot of the plot points. There are some tropes here. Some former We Are Robin teammates of the Signal show up. Rico Sheridan and I remember what the other guy's name. Oh, Daxton Chill. They show up and they've apparently gotten powers from some young Generation Z or millennial who's 18 and has all this money, and is somehow corrupt and has given them powers, and they go up against Signal, and you know, they're mad because they feel like Duke, you know, turned their back on them. They were a grassroots We Are Robin group that was protecting their own broken down neighborhood, and you know, Duke took the quick shortcut from the man being Bruce Wayne, to become the Signal, and they just feel like they feel abandoned, they feel betrayed by Duke Thomas, and so they're out for a little bit of revenge, and so they've thrown in with this guy who's got questionable morals, and again, that's just super tropey to me. That was probably the one part about the book that I didn't necessarily enjoy. But yeah, this got me thinking about Duke Thomas, and he's not somebody that I necessarily, even when he showed up in the Future State Outsider story, he was here and gone and forgettable. This has me a little more interested in him than I have been in a long time, because I think he does have potential. But I almost feel like you need to take him out of the Bat family in a way to have him fulfill that potential. Otherwise, he gets lost. There's just so much noise and so many characters within the Bat family, and I don't know that it works. I feel like he kind of needs to do what Dick Grayson did way back in the day, right? Just go off on his own and establish his own identity. I mean, his costume is reminiscent of the Bat family. You know, he's got like a bat signal on his chest, even though it's white, and he's got little bat ears, but his name is the Signal. It doesn't have anything to do with Batman. So yeah, I feel like honestly Duke Thomas is a bit of a mess. But there is potential here to maybe turn him into a cool and interesting character on his own. So I guess we'll see. And I did like the characterization that Patrick gave us of Bruce Wayne when he meets up with this Xavier or Xander guy, or whoever this millennial kid is. Xander, I guess his name is. Yeah. So yeah, I thought there was potential here. I will certainly read the end of this story. It had me interested. I also like seeing Renee Montoya as the commissioner. Obviously, I would like to see Jim Gordon as the commissioner of the Gotham City Police Department, but if it's got to be somebody else, having Montoya, that's cool. Harvey Bullock would be cool too, but I like that Renee's getting a chance to shine in that role. So yeah, I thought overall it was pretty good. Technically, probably a little dialogue heavy from Tony Patrick, but I don't think he's done a lot of work. At least I'm not familiar with him. So hopefully that's something he'll learn, a little bit more of an economy of language, because it was pretty dialogue heavy. It was a dense read. But overall, I thought it was great. And the art by Christian Duce. So I'm familiar with his work from The Flash, but this is much more polished than the work I've seen from him before. And maybe he purposely was using more of a kinetic and sketchy style with Flash to kind of convey that sense of movement. But here his line work is much more clean, backgrounds as well. So I thought the art was really spectacular. So overall, I thought it was pretty good. I would actually recommend somebody pick this up. But again, if you're not familiar with Duke Thomas, you may have a little bit of trouble following it, but you just gotta kind of plow through. And hopefully it's the first step on a road to kind of establishing who Duke Thomas is, because like I said, I feel like we don't have that.
Yeah. I thought this was an excellent primer for people who aren't familiar with the Signal. Because I mean I'm familiar enough with them, but this was a much needed primer for me. It got me going and more interested in the character again. I mean, Duke Thomas, just a little bit of background. Duke Thomas's parents were killed by the Joker, and he's always been a little bit traumatized with the memory that his parents died from Joker toxin. And he was a member of We Are Robin during the DCU campaign. There was the We Are Robin series. It was 12 issues long, and that's what introduced us to, Scott Snyder introduced us to Duke Thomas, but he became sort of the leader of We Are Robin. And the other We Are Robin eventually disbanded, and now Duke Thomas, the other members of We Are Robin somewhat resent him for going off and becoming what they called, they jokingly picked on him and called him Batman's diversity pick. That's actually a word in the story. So I actually thought that was kind of interesting. It was a good sort of like almost pop culture reference. But Duke Thomas, one of the questions I have is, I'm not sure what his power set is. And in fact, that's even seems to be one of the plot points here, is he seems to have the some sort of photo light ability of cloaking himself, camouflaging himself during the day, so you can't see him during the day, and he utilizes that to his advantage. The other great concept that I like in this opening issue is the idea of the white market instead of the black market. The white market exists where all these criminals go to buy various weapons on not the black market, but the white market. I love that we saw Dr. Veronica Cale, one of Wonder Woman's villains, trying to buy some knockoff Sinestro yellow rings. I love the fact that we also saw the Crime Bible. The Crime Bible, which I remember the Crime Bible back, man, it's been I think it's been 10 years since we saw the Crime Bible, and the reference to the Order of the Stone. These are really great callbacks, and the fact that we got Commissioner Montoya on here, I think that's great, because Montoya was the question, and she was the one during the 52 series that was looking for the Crime Bible when she was the question. So there's a lot of fantastic callbacks to some really great DC storylines here. So that if you're not familiar with Duke Thomas, I mean, I'm surprised that we got these great potential references to past storylines in this issue. I was not expecting it. I thought this was well written. Unlike you, the wordiness of the dialogue, you mentioned, it was a good observation there. It actually worked for me, because I think I needed a lot of the exposition to sort of fill me in. And Tony Patrick, I thought his writing was pretty good. The art I thought was fantastic. So I'm really impressed with this, and I give this a high recommend.
Yeah, I agree, and it was just such a surprise. Like when I saw it, I'm like, really, a Signal book? Is this what we need? But yeah, it was a really good read. So, all right, well, let's move on to Crush and Lobo #2. This is from writer Mariko Tamaki. Art is by Amin K. Nahalpan. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I always struggle with that one. Tamara Bonvillain does the colors. Arena Mayer on letters. And there's a really cool Amanda Connor coffee cover, I'll call it, as well. And then who does the other cover? Sorry, let me take a quick peek. The variant covers by Dan Mora. Okay, I thought the art style looked familiar. So we saw last issue, in the first issue, that Crush had broken up with her girlfriend, and her dad had reached out. He's in some kind of intergalactic jail, and his dad had reached out and wanted her to come and visit, and that's where this issue sort of takes off. And you weren't a big fan of the first issue of this, Rocky. How'd you feel about issue number 2?
You know what? I've if you can believe this, I went over in my head how harsh I was going to be on this second issue, and I'm really glad I had time to reflect on it. I really am, because the nicest thing I can say about it, and I really do mean this in a sincere, nice way, is this is just not my cup of tea. And but trying to be as objective as possible. Mariko Tamaki, this is not a bad story. This is just one that this doesn't feel like a Lobo Crush story to me, because Lobo, at least in the second issue, is non-existent. This is Crush reflecting on her relationship. To me, Crush is being written like a human teenager, a human female teenager who has a same-sex relationship and who's just struggling to fit in and wants to be loved and has those issues. And that's, you know what? I think I'm sure a lot of readers might be able to relate to that. And for me, I just wanted a little bit more of more psychotic. I like more of the Lobo craziness. But I think that the goal of DC here with Crush, and I think the goal of Mariko Tamaki, is to sort of, Crush is not like Lobo. She isn't like her dad. I mean, she does. She loses her temper. She can be very angry, and I'm sure she does some crazy things in this issue too. She gets into a fight, in space, and her spaceship gets destroyed, and she ends up hitching a ride on a garbage truck. That takes her right to the jail where she's going to visit Daddy Lobo, and there is some humor here. And there's the coffeeologist who she gets into a fight with when she's going. She uses, apparently there's internet in space. She actually uses her iPhone. I guess there's Wi-Fi in space. She actually uses her iPhone to find out where there's a truck stop in space, so she can stop and refill her coffee mug in the middle of space. So there is some craziness to it, which I expect from a Lobo story. And I want more Lobo and a little bit less Crush. But that's my bias, and that's a little bit, probably unfair of me to say. But I just have a hard time with imagining Crush trying to have a relationship with this perfect teenage billionaire girl, and this billionaire girl is putting up with a lot of nonsense from Crush, and I just found that part really boring. The most boring aspects of this comic book, for me personally, was the 8 or 9 or 10 or 15 pages which are wasted, with her having a flashback talking to her perfect girlfriend that she broke up with anyway. But I'm sure they're getting back together, because otherwise, why waste all those pages on it? And I want Crush to be dysfunctional. If there's one character that I don't want to ever be happy, it's Crush, because I don't view that. You know what I mean? It just seems to me that she's the daughter of Lobo. She should embody dysfunction and embody focus. She should embody humor and dysfunction, and she should be comic relief along with Lobo for us. But that's my personal point of view, and I got to respect other people may feel very differently. But my favorite Crush scenes in this issue was when she's fighting and swearing, and she's fighting the coffeeologist there and just going nuts. That's the side of Crush that I enjoy the most. But I don't know. Do you feel different or what?
Yeah, well, a little bit. I mean, the thing is, I don't have any context for Crush, right? Like, I hadn't really read anything that she was in previous to the first issue of Crush and Lobo, and I'm not a Lobo fan. His over the top, it just doesn't do it for me. So getting I don't have any context for Crush, and so to me, this is my first sort of exposure to her, and so I can't really comment on whether she seems out of character or not. I mean, for me, the characterization seems fine, but again, I don't have anything to compare it to. There is humor here. There's a lot of funny lines, and I loved the fact that Lobo was wearing reading glasses at one point, which I just think is not shouldn't be a thing. But mostly what I was left with was, for being sort of an angsty teenage love story in a lot of ways, the comic was a lot of fun. And I think that the art, especially the color work, really reflects that. So Ammon K gets to draw spaceships and aliens, tentacled aliens and whatnot, and does an incredible job of that. And the fight scenes are very kinetic and filled with a lot of detail. But yet the quiet moments between Crush and her girlfriend are handled very well. Great facial expressions, great emotions. So I was very, very impressed with the art. Um, and but I do feel like this is a bit of a transitional issue. You know, the first issue sort of established the tone of the series, and with Crush arriving at her father's prison on the last page of this story and ready to confront him, I imagine the next issue will be a lot of that. Um, and I got to think that Lobo is in some way going to convince Crush or try to use Crush as a way to escape, despite him, claiming to be in a different place and ready to take accountability for a lot of his past actions or what. I might not know Lobo that well, but I know that that's not Lobo. He's got to have some sort of ulterior motive. So in a way, this was a little bit of a transitional issue. And I think the strength of it lies in the art and the color work, the line work and the color work. So, but yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it well enough, but I am coming at it from the perspective of not really having read that many Lobo stories and read almost nothing of Crush previous to this. So I did enjoy it. I thought it was fun, but I could see why some others might not like it.
I just
speaking to them.
Yeah, I just want to be clear that it would be unfair of me to say that this is that Crush is out of character. She's not necessarily out of character. There is consistency in some general respects to how she was in Teen Titans. I'm my own particular bias is that I would like her to err on the psychotic side as opposed to the teenage angsty, just by the numbers, typical teenage side, because she's half cesarean and I just can't imagine she's going to be she should not be this normal. In my mind, but that's just me. That's just me. Maybe she'll get more psychotic as the.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it could very well be that visiting with her father sort of triggers that, and she does get more crazy. So, all right, well, let's move on. Next, we're going to talk about Batman number 110. This is from writer James Tynion IV. We have art from Jorge Jiminez. Tamayo Morey does the colors. Clayton Cowell does the letters, and then. As we've seen in a lot of these Batman, but although I don't think we got one last month, but our last issue, but there is the Ghostmaker backup, Chapter 4. James Tynion also writes that. The art there is by Ricardo Lopez Ortiz. Romulo Fajardo Jr. handles colors, and Clayton Cowell on letters. So we're continuing down the path of the Magistrate, of course, as we have been in Batman for a long time, but it didn't feel as derivative, which is so interesting to talk about how a story that takes place before Future State could feel derivative of a story that takes place in the future. But based on the fact that it was published first and you're pulling in ideas from that's basically what it is. We're seeing James Tynion build up to this idea of the Magistrate, and that's just not the usual way to do it, right? It all goes back to the non-linear way that DC decided to do Future State. So we basically have Batman taking on Peacekeeper 1, and we do learn a little bit that Peacekeeper 1 wasn't necessarily who we first thought that he might be. Like, he was introduced as this guard at Arkham Asylum who was, very much a hero of A-Day and whatnot. And Sean Mahoney, was his name. And he was a hero. And because of that, Simon Saint thought he would be the perfect sort of face of the Magistrate, right? Like, make him the first peacekeeper. And then we find out that actually he was a very sadistic guard there who wanted to be a police officer, but was rejected for, reasons of psychological problems and whatnot. And so he was really not somebody that you would ever trust in a position of authority. And now he's become the face of the Magistrate, which I guess sort of works for Simon Saint, right? He's trying to sow chaos. He's trying to sow disorder. He's trying to instill fear in the people of Gotham so that they will accept the Magistrate, this fascist organization taking over as the protectors of Gotham, taking over for any vigilantes like Batman, taking over for a more established law and order group like the Gotham City Police Department. And as I was reading this issue, what struck me was, so we understand why Simon Saint wants the chaos and the disorder and the fear so that he can establish the magistrate, but we don't actually know why he wants to establish the magistrate. Like, what is the ultimate goal? Is it just to rule Gotham? Is it just to be powerful? Is it just he just craves power for power's sake? Like, is there another end game? And maybe that's why I'm struggling with this whole idea of the magistrate storyline, because I have no point of reference for Simon Saint. He's just at this point sort of a mustache twirling villain because I can't understand why he's doing it. You know, I get why he's instilling the fear and the chaos. It's to establish the magistrate as the biggest power broker in Gotham. But why? Like, is it just power for power's sake? Because if that's the case, then again, I got to go back to this idea of the mustache twirling villain. But I did like the action. I do like that the stakes are raised. I do like the fact that even though it may not seem realistic, that Sean Mahoney apparently is a match for Batman one-on-one in hand-to-hand combat, and Bruce Wayne ends up having to rely on Ghostmaker rescuing him. And I still have the same problems with Ghostmaker that I've had from the beginning. I like him as a character. The problems that stem is the same problems I have with anything that's retconned in. Like, wait, we have how many decades and decades of Batman stories, and we were never told that there was another guy training alongside Batman when he was traveling the world? Well, the reason we were never told is because the character didn't exist, because it wasn't until James Tynion decided to go back and say, hey, guess what? We're going to insert this in there. And I don't know. I don't like that. I wish somebody had thought a long time ago, hey, let's put this character there and somebody will develop him later. Of course, no artist is ever going to, or writer's ever going to do that, right? It's always retcon. It's the same problem I have with the Court of Owls. Wait, Batman's the world's greatest detective, but yet the Court of Owls was existing in the background of Gotham for decades, and Batman never knew until Scott Snyder came up with the idea. You know, it's so. But all that being said, I do like what, if I can put that aside, that little nitpick, I do like the dynamic between Batman and Ghostmaker. I think Ghostmaker's a fun character. So this was one of the better issues, or one of the issues of Batman that I've enjoyed the most recently, because despite the fact that the Magistrate is front and center here, we're getting plenty of other stuff. We're getting plenty of Ghostmaker. We're getting plenty of Oracle. We're getting some Harley Quinn. We're getting some Molly Miracle. And so despite the fact that it's the Magistrate is kind of the spine of the story, we're getting enough interesting other aspects of the mythos of Batman and the story of Gotham that Tynion's telling, that it's enough to distract me from the problems I have with the Magistrate. But I do wish that we did have a little more motivation or background into the motivation of Simon Saint beyond just he just wants to have power. And then Mayor Nakano, is there a more spineless character that's been introduced or incompetent?
Yeah, he seems to be. He's being played like a violin. He's easily manipulated. Oh my God. Yeah.
Like, when he first showed up, I had a feeling I was going to be like, God, this guy really? Because the thing is, he's smart enough and politically savvy enough to get elected to the highest office, civilian office in Gotham City. How could he be this oblivious to what Simon Saint and others are doing in using him? It's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I guess the argument could be made he's blinded by his trauma and sorrow and loss over his partner and what happened to him, that he figures the ends justify the means of getting, of allowing the Magistrate to take over. But right. I don't know, man. I feel like anybody with half a brain would realize. So, and as far as the art goes, Jorge Jimenez, I mean, it's pretty standard Jorge Jimenez art. It feels the same quality that his Batman art has felt throughout, which it's not my favorite Jorge Jimenez art. And I talked about it way back during the Joker War. It's just a little bit of a looser style, and I prefer when his style is a little tighter. But that being said, I have absolutely zero problem with his storytelling, the visual pacing, the transitions from panel to panel, all very good. The color work. So visually, it's a pretty strong book. It's just not my favorite Jorge Jimenez art, and that's just a personal thing. So I'll give Jorge a lot of credit for given us some really great dynamic art here. So, what were your thoughts on the main story, Rocky?
Well, I'm gonna defend Mayor Nagano's stupidity and naivete for a second, because I do think that just to maybe give some props to writer James Tynion here. I do think that he's done a reasonably good job of showing just how much of a successful negative PR campaign Simon Saint has managed to orchestrate through the Scarecrow, and in blaming all these miscellaneous attacks on various Gotham businesses, and blaming the Insanity Collective about it, stoking the fear and not doing it with gas. But it's easy to stoke the fear in Gotham. This is at the end of Joker War. City Hall, City Hall wasn't even being attacked. It was kind of all a ruse, an elaborate ruse to make the mayor Mayor Nagano believe that Gotham was being attacked by the Insanity Collective. Simon Saint, in conjunction with the Scarecrow, literally created a fear state without the use of gas, and making the people of Gotham believe that Miracle Molly and the Insanity Collective are behind the state of panic and fear and the crime spree that Gotham has been in for the last 5 months since A-Day, since Arkham Asylum Day. Ever since that day that Arkham Asylum was destroyed and that Joker got the blame for that, it has set off a chain of events that has ultimately led to what is coming to fruition in this issue. And this issue ends with the Magistrate program being finally approved and the Peacekeepers being sent right to an abandoned Wayne Industry warehouse where the Insanity Collective is with Miracle Molly, and they ask that she surrender. She surrenders, but they won't take her surrender. They're going to kill her, and that's how it ends. It ends on a big cliffhanger here, and we know that Batman and Ghostmaker aren't far behind. So much happens in this issue. There is also Nightwing and Oracle. Nightwing says, I'm not going back to Bloodhaven. I'm going to stay here. I'm on my way. Oracle's on guard here. Miracle Molly is, we're going to be able to see her strut some of her stuff next issue. This is what it's been building to all this time. And I'm a little bit more forgiving than you are on the whole power hungry Simon Saint. I mean, quest for power is an age-old motive. I appreciate maybe you wanted something a little bit more sophisticated, but this is Gotham, and sometimes some of the motivations here can be quite basic. This worked for me, and this is, as I said, Chase, you and I have said this before. In almost every week we say the same thing. In so many ways, it's too bad Future State revealed some of this stuff, because I think this might have had more gravitas had we not known what the outcome is at Future State, because Future State sort of took made some reveals that otherwise would have been pleasant surprises here. But I reflect your comments on Jorge Jimenez's art. I like it. I really like I love Ghostmaker and Harley and Batman working together. I think they make a hell of a team. I love the fact that Batman actually blew up timed the explosives on the Magistrate's building. He timed those explosives in order to create a form of Morse code that only Ghostmaker could read. I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was awesome that he did that, and Ghostmaker picked up on it, and he's right behind him with Harley Quinn of all people helping him out. I don't know. I'm having a lot of fun with this, man. There's definitely some comics this week and that are just putting a smile on my face, and this was one of those issues.
Yeah, I agree with you. As much as I complain about Magistrate, like if I didn't know what the Magistrate was, if the Magistrate was a mystery, like what is this Magistrate? What is he trying to do? I would be much more invested in this story. But the idea of this fascist organization, this fascist militaristic organization running Gotham City is so 2020 to me. Like it was so long ago, right? Mm-hmm. But we talked about it. It's a reflection of the politics and the way the world is right now, that we're getting all these fascist villains. That's just the way that it goes. These things come in cycles. But the fact that I know what it is removes some of that air of mystery in it. It's like, reading the last page of a mystery novel when you find out who did it. You can still go back and read the rest of the novel and it can still be enjoyable and very well done, but you're missing some of that impact, So yeah, it is too bad that they chose to release Future State the way they did. As far as the backup, I don't really have a lot to say. That doesn't sound like what I've said about this already. I think that Ricardo Lopez Ortiz's art, his style is similar to Jorge Jimenez, but even a little more stylized and a little rougher. And so it's not my favorite, but it is good comic art. It's just personally not my favorite. And it is interesting. I do feel like in this particular chapter of the story, we get less characterization of Ghostmaker than we've gotten previously from some of the other chapters. But man, is this a whole heck of a lot of fun. It's fleshing out who Ghostmaker is as a character. We get a flashback where we see Ghostmaker having fought against the investigator previously.
The instigator.
Instigator previously. And it's great, just talking about how he, fought him for just hours on end and never tired. It's kind of adding to that mystique of Ghostmaker. And again, I just have to put it out of my mind that, and Tynion did try to build it into his character, who he is as a character, right? Like he doesn't want to be known. He wants to be in the background. That's why we haven't heard of him, even though he's been out there operating for just as long as Batman. So just kind of adding to the mystique. And I got to imagine that James Tynion's having a lot of fun with this Ghostmaker backup. So yeah, it's a good story. It makes me. I mean, I've been a fan of the Ghostmaker character despite that little nitpick from the beginning. I think he's my favorite of the new characters that Tynion has created. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of this, when it's all said and done, and we've talked about this before, the Ghostmaker would get his own series at some point. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah. I don't have much to add to your comments. This was a lot of fun. And I actually think it's, I like the fact that Ghostmaker seems to be a character that he's not as serious as Batman. I know that Ghostmaker, to many people, they criticize Ghostmaker as being sort of a Batman analog, but I actually find I have no problem with that, but he's Batman light, and I like that because I like Ghostmaker. He's got more of a sense of humor. He is generally a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit more crazy, but he's still got he does have his own principles, and he's got his own eclectic, crazy rogues gallery, as these series of backups have shown. I love Madame Midas. I think she's a great billionaire bitch. I think she brings something to it, and I enjoy it. Again, this is fun. This is what James Tynion is. He is keeping Ghostmaker backup stories very straightforward, perhaps too simple, if I could use that term. But I think for me it works, and I think that these things have long-term value. I think these characters, there's so much to work with moving forward. So we'll see.
All right, up next we have Action Comics 2021 Annual Number 1 from writer Phillip Kennedy Johnson. Saya Aum does the art for pages 1 through 17 and 31 through 40. We have Scott Godlewski on the middle pages of 18 through 30. Hi-Fi is the colorist. Dave Sharp is the letters. And this is another Tales of the House of L, similar to the Future State one-shot that we got from Phillip Kennedy Johnson during Future State. So what do you think about this one, Rocky?
Sorry, I'm just getting set up here. Yeah. This was very much this felt like it was a continuation in many ways of the story we got in Future State, because this is a future story of the House of L thousands of years from now, where we know that ultimately Kal-El is missing, and ultimately the son of Kal-El, Jonathan Kent, is actually Feroz, who is the ultimate bad guy, who has killed Darkseid and is the ruler of Apocalypse. And this issue essentially introduces us to a very young Theola. And Theola, this is a younger version of the Theola that we are seeing in the pages of Action Comics. The older Theola was rescued by Superman on those Warzone battleships, and is now at the Fortress of Solitude and being consoled by Lois Lane. And this is the story of a younger Theola who was told these stories when she was younger, she is just a reminder to some readers. Theola is a Phaolesian, or a Philosian, a Phaolesian. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, I would probably say Tholotian. Yeah.
Philosian, and a Philosian is a sort of a they branched off from the Kryptonian world thousands of years ago, long before Krypton exploded, and ultimately there's going to be a reuniting of the Philosian and the Kryptonian people, and ultimately this is a story where this older gentleman tells Theola this story about about what's going to happen in the future on the House of El, where there's a marriage of two houses. There's a marriage of a wedding between Allura Venel, who is a Valkyrie of Warworld, and a person by the name of Khan, who is a Phaolosian of Warworld Prime. And the wedding that they have, reuniting their houses, is interrupted and attacked by Theros, who uses a Phantom Zone projector to basically project all of these various members of the House of El into the Phantom Zone, consisting of Brandon Kent, who is Earth Superman, Ronan Kent, who is the protector of Metropolis, Rowan Kent, she's the female Blue Lantern, and also Kara Zor-El makes an appearance. And again, it's interesting. They end up trapped in the Phantom Zone, where they end up meeting with Cyborg Superman, and this is a good adventure tale. This is a long story. You get a lot of bang for your buck. There's limited characterization here, but because there's not much you can do in just the short few in the 41 pages or the 40 some odd pages of the annual here. I think there's 38 pages of story, but in any event, I didn't mind it. I just openly question, though, what's the point of this? I don't see this future ever coming to fruition, so I consider this more of a what-if story or an imaginary tale of a Superman family, the House of El, thousands of years hence. But there's no question that if you really liked, a lot of people, having read the reviews of Future State, and we reviewed all the Future State issues, we actually didn't mind, if I recall, that House of El issue in Future State. It was one of the more interesting stories. And this is, just sort of building on the lore of that, the mythology of what led to the House of El and the various players. And this ends with Ronan Kent, the future Black Superman, who is the protector of Metropolis, actually becoming Earth's Superman because Brandon Kent gives him that mantle. And that is at the end of this issue. So this is a representative of the legacy of the House of El. There's a lot of characters involved here. They talk about hope, and they get out of they defeat, against all odds, they manage to get out of the Phantom Zone. It's action packed. There's a lot of, again, it's, I personally, I'm not a huge fan of the future. To me, I want a future Superman who is grounded on Earth. I don't like the future scientific Superman with his own House of El and everyone's still wearing the S symbol and everything else. That's just my cup of tea. I kind of like a more grounded Superman family on Earth as opposed to what this has to offer. But again, just like I said with Crush and Lobo, this is just another interpretation of the future Superman, and I think it's actually well written. It's well done. And I apologize, Jason. Who wrote it? I never even.
Philip Kennedy Johnson.
Right. Yeah.
Same guy who wrote the House of El one shot. So
right. But I don't know. What did you think? I thought it's sort of typical because it makes sense that Philip Kennedy Johnson wrote this. But no real surprises here to me.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Like, what is the point of this? Like, why is this necessary? Because again, much like the Crime Syndicate story I was talking about that we kicked the episode off with, about how I don't have any context for these characters, so why should I care? 100% that. Other than the fact that these are descendants of Superman, which I also find to be strange. Like, this is a big family. So did John Kent just have like 100 kids or what? Like, we know Pyros himself is the son of Kal-El, the son of our Superman, and Circe, which is a whole nother thing that I've left alone. But and obviously the implication being, well, Circe probably tricked Superman. She maybe under the guy, she made herself look like Lois Lane, and that's how she got impregnated and had this Pyros guy who redeems himself in the story that we had previously read in Future State. Here, he's still a bad guy. There's just a lot of problems with this in my mind. Like, how is, yes, it's many, many years in the future, but like, how has the family gotten so big, and why should I care about any of these characters? Because I kind of don't. And why does Cyborg Superman not look cybernetic at all anymore? Like, that's never explained. Like, if you're gonna do Hank Henshaw and make him look like Hank Henshaw, and then maybe that's my in. That's where I can feel something familiar, a touchstone, so that I get more invested in the story. But he doesn't act like Cyborg Superman. He doesn't look like Cyborg Superman. So yeah, I end up, it felt like it was honestly a chore to read. Like, and I'm a Superman fan. I should never feel like reading the Superman book is a chore to read. But Kal-El certainly doesn't show up anywhere in this story, and he didn't show up anywhere in the previous House of El one shot. And to me, that's a little bit of a problem, because you're putting House of El on there, and then I want some of my Superman, at least in a flashback. At least give me something. But there's nothing. They're just all these characters, and so you end up spending the first half of the book trying to keep straight who's who, and Brandon Kent's the Superman of Earth, and then he lets Ronan take over, and again, so what? I don't care about any of these characters. I'm not invested in them. Like, why should I care? It ends up feeling very much like a waste. So yeah, I didn't really care for it. I thought the art was fine. It wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. It was just comic book art. Godlewski did the Future State House of El, and I felt the same about that. He's not somebody whose art I particularly enjoy, or that it stands out to me, but it's certainly serviceable. So yeah, I mean, ultimately I was a little bit disappointed. But I didn't necessarily even have any expectations going in when I saw the House of El, based on what we got in the Future State House of El, where I didn't care about the characters and it felt like an unnecessary story. I was pretty sure this was going to be the same thing, and it was. So I don't know, and I would think that anybody who's not a Superman fan is not picking this up. But if you're a Superman fan, you don't get any Superman. So I'm just not sure what the purpose of this was, other than to give Phillip Kennedy Johnson a chance to world build, which I know he loves to do.
Yeah.
But without context, without something that anchors it to the Superman that we care about, it feels a little bit wasted.
I think they're just going to make it a tale of the Omniverse, and everything matters, and it'll be a story that exists out there in the multiverse somewhere, regardless of what happens to the mainstream DC universe. And every now and then we'll probably get a story of this future far off era of Superman that exists somewhere out there in the Omniverse. So because and just in defense, Jace, I will say, in defense of these types of stories, I mean, I remember back in the 70s during the Kurt Swan era, I remember we would get random stories like this out of the blue about future, and we'd get only 8 pages of it, and just craziness, and it was fun back then. And if I'm being really objective here, this is, I did take my time reading this, and there is a story here. There are a bunch of characters that I think that if this has a lot of potential to be its own universe, its own world, if they want to build upon it. So I'm a little bit less harsh on it than I was, because I was a little bit more harsh on it during Future State, because it kind of lost me. But anyways, I think if anything, maybe DC is trying to satisfy too many readers maybe with their Superman, because they're going off in so many myriad of different directions. I think that might be what they're trying to do with and to what effect, and to what whether or not it's working or not, I'm not sure, because we're not privy to sales. So
yeah, it's a good point, and maybe I am being too harsh on it. And I didn't mind those stories back in the day, especially Silver Age and even into the Bronze Age, where you'd get these sort of what if fanciful tales, but it was usually a backup story. When I got a big chunk of the Superman that I cared about as the main story, and so that's the difference. And in a way, it's sort of the same problem I have right now with Superman. It's been so long. It's been pre-Bendis before I've gotten some Superman stories that I like, that feel like actual Superman stories. So when I get this, giant annual with 40 pages and it's none of the Superman that I enjoy, I think that's it. My criticism of this probably has something to do with my frustration for not having had a good Superman story in quite a long time. So
Yeah.
anyway, let's move on. Justice League number 64, United Order Part 1, from writer Brian Michael Bendis. The art is by Steve Pugh, colors by Nick Filardi, letters by Josh Reed. And let me make sure. So I've already read 65. I want to make sure that I'm clear on what happens here. So yeah, basically Naomi has become part of the Justice League, and her parents show up for a tour of the Hall of Justice. Meanwhile, out in space, at the headquarters of the United Planets, Sinmar Utopica, who was the big bad that Brian Michael Bendis introduced right at the end of his run of Superman, is about to go on trial, but it turns out that he escaped, and he's headed toward Earth to get his revenge on Superman. And despite the fact that the United Order, which is sort of the peacekeeping force of the United Planets, had been able to capture Sinmar Utopica and keep him subdued, he has escaped. And apparently, all of a sudden, this United Order is no longer a match for him, because he defeats them and is headed toward Earth. And the United Order makes a call, a warning to Earth from Hawkslayer, the Thanagarian member of the United Order, calls and says, "Hey, just a heads up, this crazy bad dude is headed your way, and probably is going to want to destroy the Earth." So that's basically all that happens in this issue. And then other than that, we get a little bit of some character who we don't know who he is yet. We find out in issue 65, but he's basically stalking Green Arrow and Black Canary, who are trying to have some quiet moments to themselves. And who he is, we find out next issue, and yeah, that's a whole nother thing that we'll definitely be talking about in depth. But this very much feels like a Brian Michael Bendis issue. Tons of dialogue, but not a lot of stuff actually happening, and a reminder that Bendis couldn't possibly care less about any sort of continuity or history of the DC, which goes hand in hand with who that mysterious character is that I mentioned. But also it goes hand in hand with Bendis changing the way Krypton blew up and introducing us to Rogol Zar. And just, I've never been a fan of Bendis, and I have to admit, meeting him, the man's joy of comics is infectious. And I don't think it's ego or whatnot that he thinks he's such a great comic writer that he, can ignore continuity and history and just insert. I just was talking earlier about how much I dislike retcons, and Bendis is the king of retcon these days, because I think he puts blinders on. He just wants to tell the story that he wants to tell, and he'll shoehorn it in any way that he can, and previous history and continuity be damned. And so, this idea of the way the United Planet started has different from how it was previously. The idea of Rogol Zar, like I mentioned, this mysterious character that we'll talk about in a couple weeks. And then on top of that, you get all the extraneous dialogue, and it's just not a very good comic. The art by Steve Pugh, this is, last thing we saw Steve Pugh do was going back to Future State again. It's like a bad penny. It keeps turning up in this episode. But he did the 3-issue Superman versus Imperious Lex. And I felt like that art was a little stiff, with really thick line work. Here, his art is much finer lines, much more dynamic, much more kinetic. Feels a little more. It doesn't feel so stiff, and I think he does a great job. So I absolutely love the art, love the color work, but man, this Justice League title, it's not good. It's not. I'm not enjoying it. And I mean, again, it's Bendis, so no surprise that he takes a character that he created in Superman just as he was leaving the title. Maybe didn't get to do what he wanted to do with him there, so let's bring him in here. But is every single character and villain that Bendis comes up with have to be like on level with Darkseid as a threat? Like, can we get some more grounded human stories? Instead we've gone from the villains of Naomi's home world that are universe-ending threats to now Sinmar, Utopica, who's the more powerful than Superman, and I don't know. It feels tired and tropey, and it's not good. It's not good.
Well, just to build on what you're saying, Bendis has had a problem with DC in that he's never really finished the storyline. He never really finished the Rogolzar storyline. It sort of ended abruptly. With Rogolzar wasn't even really punished; he was stopped. That was it, and then he ended up in the 31st century, and then with Event Leviathan, that never really had an ending. And then we just finished reviewing Checkmate #1 last week. And nothing really has an ending. Naomi was 6 issues. It never really had an ending. We had 6 issues of his Naomi. We still, at the end of 6 issues of Naomi, we didn't even know what her power set was. We knew nothing about her homeworld. We knew very, very little. We got a first story arc here in Justice League, and it never had an ending. It had a non-ending. They just went to another Naomi's homeworld and then just ended up coming back because it was kind of a poisonous world. Again, nothing substantive. Nothing was learned. Nothing was... And the thing is, Bendis is building on and taking plot lines from his other storylines and taking it here. We had Sinmar Utopica, which was a villain that I never understood. I don't know, but when I was reading his Superman Action Comics, whatever it was, I didn't understand Sinmar Utopica. I never understood the villain. I still don't know what the motivations of the villain were. It actually needed to be explained to me at the beginning of this issue who Sinmar Utopica is. I didn't really know. I never understood why. I still don't understand why Sinmar Utopica wants to destroy Superman. That was never explained, even in the 4 or 5 issues that in Superman. Just really terribly handled. And we now know for what. Bendis is selfish. He only writes for himself, and he only writes for his own storylines. And no more is that a better example of that than in this issue. Now, having said that, I want to go back here, and I do want to give, if you can believe this, hell has frozen over. I'm going to give Bendis a compliment here. I'm going to give him a good compliment because, I mean, he's taken some I've been hard on him. I actually really enjoy his interaction here that he scripts between Oliver Queen and Black Canary. I thought it was quite well, and I didn't mind the dialogue. I thought it was really well. I thought it was quite nice. I thought it was even romantic. There was some nice quiet moments. And then Damon Rose, and Damon Rose is a sort of, we believe, an assassin, and he names himself in this issue, so that takes place in this issue. I'm being cautious here because Jason and I have read the subsequent issue. So Damon Rose was introduced as Damon Rose. We know he was Damon Rose in Checkmate #1. He is here. So if you did read Checkmate #1, you might think that this individual, Damon Rose, is out to kill them, but apparently he's not. He's affiliated with Checkmate, but that's all we find out this issue, and he interacts with Oliver Queen and Black Canary. Again, it's very decompressed. It's all dialogue. Bendis' typical style of pushing everything to the next issue until things build to a hilt, and then in the final issue of the story arc, ultimately reveal nothing. That is unfortunately likely what's going to happen here. Of all things, we get Naomi's parents. Who would have thought that it was so important that we meet Naomi's parents and that Naomi's parents visit the Hall of Justice? And I guess they're having some sort of picnic. I mean, Black Adam is eating an apple outside the Hall of Justice while Aquaman out of the blue wants to have a sparring match with Naomi on the front lawn of the Hall of Justice. I guess this is the new Justice League, I guess. And it's not even that bad. It's just that this, you can tell he wrote the Avengers. This actually, if you've ever read his Avengers work, this is the type of stuff that the Avengers would engage in. All that, this is just a very different way to write these seemingly innocuous character moments where Bendis will give the illusion that he's developing these characters when he's not. All he's doing is making them talk. There's a difference between making characters talk for no purpose versus character development. And I'm not really sure what the purpose of this was here. Was it really important that we have the Wonder Twin meets Naomi's parents? I guess so. It just doesn't move the story along very well. But having said that, it's clear here that all of society is there, that the city is there, the citizens are there to celebrate with the Justice League in front of the Hall of Justice. And you can kind of see the absurdity of it when Sinmar Utopia is going to attack the Hall of Justice. And you would think that who in their right mind would want to visit the Hall of Justice? Because, I mean, they have to know that it's not the first time that, a group of a superhero headquarters is going to be attacked. But I digress. The art's fantastic. I love the art. Yeah, I like the idea of the United Order. I like the idea that the United Order, remember that a quick background for people, remember that the Green Lantern Corps no longer protect the universe. It's now the United Planets. They've created their own police force called the United Order, and it consists of Prince Zerep, who's a Tamaranian, Hawkslayer, who's a pretty cool looking Hawkman character, he's Thanagarian, the Dominator, QQ, Divinia is a Daxamite, and Bloodstar is a Gardanian. So we got some new characters here. So speculator alert. There is a lot to mine here. I just wish that I felt like more, that we had a little bit more substance. It always feels the same way with Bendis, that we kind of, when I start talking about it, there is stuff that happens in the issue, but it just lacks substance. We're always waiting for answers that should have been given to us 5 issues ago, and it's frustrating, but I don't know. I mean, once again, I like the backup better. Bring me Justice League Dark.
Yeah, I agree. And you're totally right about Sinmar Utopia. 5-issue story in Superman, and we never did really understand his motivations other than he's got the power of Superman and decided he wanted to be bad. Like it never made any sense. And he's got a terrible character design, which I expect more from Yvonne Reese, but I imagine his character design direction was coming from Bendis. So it's not good. The backup Justice League Dark from Ram V. The art in the backup is by Sumit Kumar. Zermonico's moved over to Infinite Frontier right now, so that's why it's Sumit Kumar. Romulo Fajardo Jr. does colors, Rob Leon letters. We did see last issue this woman. We find out she's Elnara Roshdu. She's the 13th Knight of Arthur's Court. We saw Batman had been following her. She's in Gotham. She's trying to figure out what her mission is. She knows it has to do with Merlin, and her path is on a collision course with the Justice League Dark, because we know they're trying to find Merlin as well. But Batman, he's a little harsh in this issue. He's a little sort of full of himself, and tells her, this is Gotham. I got, because Elnara wants to Elnara, she wants to team up. She's like, hey, we can work together. I sense that you're a fellow knight. And Batman's like, no, I got this. This is Gotham. I knew something was going on, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And now this lack of evidence makes sense. They're using magic. I got it. This is my city. Go away, basically. And so he ends up tracking down this group that's worshiping or has something to do with Merlin, and then kind of gets his butt kicked because of the magic, which he is not equipped to handle. And it's Elnara to the rescue. So pretty solid issue. I don't like the Sumit Kumar art as much as Zermonico. It's just a different style, and it's not quite as clean, but the art by Kumar is very good, just a different style. And the color work is not quite as bright, which sort of suits this a little bit of a thicker line, and it's not quite as traditional superhero art from Sumit. So the color work by Romulo Fajardo Jr. shifts to a little bit of a paler kind of palette, which, again, Romulo Fajardo Jr. is an excellent colorist, certainly knows what they're doing, so not a big surprise. But yeah, I mean, this continues to be a very wonderful story, the characterization, the interaction between the characters, the dynamics of the story. I mean, Ram V is just killing it. It's fantastic. There's a great scene between Zatanna and Ragman, which kind of foreshadows their relationship and what's going on there. It's clear there's something behind the scenes. So, yeah, it just, when you put these two stories in the same book and you get such poor storytelling in one story and such great storytelling in the other, it makes the first story look even worse in comparison. So, what did you think, Rocky?
I liked it. We are told that the forces, the group of monks that were, I guess, evil monks that Batman was sort of that he rescued the 13th Night from, were actually, apparently they're the brothers Ambrosius, the brothers of Ambrosius, who apparently have been projecting psionic waves around Gotham using magic, and they're obviously likely affiliated with Merlin. Of course, Batman doesn't know that. The 13th Night, of course, Eleonoru Roshtu. It's very interesting. It's very comedic. It's unintentional comedy. You know, she compliments Batman on his unique kind of armor, and she even asks if she could, how he made it. And Batman actually thinks she's a little bit crazy, but like he alluded to, this is in Gotham City. Everybody's a little crazy, but he doesn't quite trust her, so he doesn't let her tag along. But to Elnoru's credit, she follows Batman, and it's a good thing she does, because she ends up saving his butt against the same brothers of Ambrosius later on down the line. And at the very final panel, there is just a callback to another classic character, and I had to Google this. They end up finding a character by the name of Randhir Singh, who's trapped in his own body, and he's got all these metal wires and whatever hooked up to him. And for those who are wondering, Randhir Singh is a UN delegate of India, and he's a longtime associate of Jason Blood, the Demon, who back in the day would be in the pages of the Demon and would help Demon deal with supernatural bad guys, in a nutshell. And so this is Ram V. I mean, he's introducing up all these characters that are perfectly affiliated with Justice League Dark that you would associate with it. You made a good observation where Zatanna has a conversation with Rory Regan, who is the Ragman, and he very cleverly lets her know that he is aware of the fact that Zatanna's life is turning upside down, and he emphasizes the words upside down by reference to the Upside Down Man, because every time Zatanna uses her powers, the Upside Down Man is that much closer to taking over Zatanna. And so that's a secret, and that's something that is building to a head as well. So all in all, once again, we got like 8 pages of a lot of action and a lot of actual plot progression. More plot progression, again, as usual, in 8 pages than we get in the entire Bendis JL run himself. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's you got to pick up, you got to buy Justice League for a great Justice League story, but it's called Justice League Dark.
Yeah, it's too bad. All right, moving on. Batman Fortnite Zeropoint number 6. This is the last issue. Concept and story consultant Donald Mustard, writer Christos Gage, pencils by Riley Brown, inks by Nelson DeCastro, colors by John Kalis. Yeah, this is the end of the story, sort of. What did you think, Rocky?
Yeah, I'm just let me get just set up here. Here we go. Well, actually, Harley Quinn on the cover of Zeropoint number 6, she kind of has her arms up in the air, saying almost like she's saying to herself, "I don't know what to think." I feel like Harley on this. This is good. This part 6. This last issue ended with Batman and Catwoman being trapped in Zeropoint, mainly due to the machinations of Deathstroke, who we discover in this issue is actually working with Lex Luthor. It's Lex Luthor that is, in fact, sort of utilizing the Zeropoint for his own ends. And this issue it's actually a wonderful Batman Catwoman story. You really see the love between Batman and Catwoman here as they try to figure out how to escape, but they have to find out how to escape the Zeropoint through different means than they did in order to get their sort of compatriots out in the previous 5 issues. And I like the character work here. It was very well done. Again, artistically, it was really good. They had to go back. They end up retracing their steps, and it involves them. They need a third person to help them get out, and that third person is Harley Quinn. And what they discover, in typical Harley fashion, Harley actually loves being in Zeropoint. She doesn't want to leave. And leave it to Harley to, of course, be the typical wild card in every story. And she actually quite likes being the wild card here, but they need her in order to play a role in, and you'll have to forgive me, I forget the specific plot point as to why they need 3. But in any event, this was action-packed again, as every single issue was. Again, this is a fun issue, but this one, I think, went that extra mile, because I really enjoyed Harley, and I enjoyed the wild card that Harley had about not wanting to leave Zeropoint. And I really liked the interaction between Catwoman and Batman, where they openly question themselves as to whether or not they actually want to leave Zeropoint, because they're afraid that they're gonna forget the fact that they love each other, because they know they love each other, but they don't remember everything about their other lives. And of course, we DC readers know that their lives are kind of a mess right now over the last few years, and you can understand somehow deep inside, instinctually, they both know that their lives are maybe too complicated if they end up going back to the real world. And of course, sadly, that is ultimately exactly what they discover. But they decide they have to go back anyway, because they just instinctively know it's the right thing to do. And so this it had some degree of sadness to it, tragedy to it, but also ultimately heroism. I thought this was a really nice ending to this story, because I thought it basically nailed the power and the passion of Batman and Catwoman. And I can't speak for the other characters, because I don't play I don't play Fortnite, I don't play those video games, but I thought this was well done. I got to give Christos Cage, the writer here, I got to give him full props, and the art here I thought was quite impressive. But what do you think, Jace?
Yeah, I was a little bit disappointed in the end, because in the end we didn't get an ending. In fact, we got a blurb at the end that said "far from the end." So it's clear, and I do wonder, was it originally meant to end, but then it was wildly successful, and so DC editorial decided, hey, give us a little bit of an ambiguous ending so that we can continue the series. It seems like they're going to do more Batman Fortnite. So I think that's a good thing. I was actually in a comic book shop last Friday, and there was this kid in there with his parents who was trying to buy the whole series, trying to track down all the issues. Had never really read a comic before, clearly played Fortnite. Hopefully he's going to read them. Hopefully, he's going to take that first step on the path of becoming a comic book reader and a comic book fan. So I think these kind of crossover events are important. And so if they're going to do more, I do think that's great, because this has been successful, and maybe it can bring in new comic book readers. But I wasn't prepared to not get a nice, clean ending. At least we do find out who the villains are, so that I thought that was great. But it's almost like, even though this is the final issue, we have more questions than answers still at this point. Yeah. So in that way, you want to talk about an island. Anybody remember Lost? Every time I watched an episode of that show, I felt like I knew less coming out of it than I did going in. There were always more questions than answers. So there is that aspect of the story. So that being said, the positives, like you said, it's very much encapsulates Batman and Catwoman's relationship, and that's kind of the through line that goes through all the issues, which really grounds it and makes it feel like this Batman is our Batman, with how it ties in so much with what's been going on with Batman and Catwoman in the regular DC universe. So I think that works really well. The scope of it feels big. It feels action-packed. And in that way, I imagine it feels very much like Fortnite. I don't play Fortnite. I have never played Fortnite, just like Rocky, so I can't really speak to that. But in my mind, and from what I know of Fortnite, it does feel that way. And And the fact that Fortnite is a game you can play over and over and over, like, you get to the end and then it just restarts. It's that loop. And the story that Christos Gage and Donald Mustard told here, very much that the idea of the loop, that you can relive things and do things differently each time, but it's always going to start over. It's sort of infinite. In a way, from a marketing standpoint, that's fantastic. You can always tell Batman Fortnite stories, Batman Zeropoint stories. But also from an idea of, hey, how can I keep it fresh? And even though it's Batman, it's Catwoman, it's Fortnite, and these are all concepts we're familiar with, how can I keep it fresh? Well, the story can be different every time because it constantly loops. So there's a lot of good here. I think the art by Riley Brown, like Rocky said, is excellent. The entire series has been brightly colored the entire time, no matter who the artist has been. So I think that works very well. And just this whole idea of what the Zeropoint is, why these villains want it. I could have done without seeing the Batman Who Laughs Last, but just because I think, he's from the Joker, right? It's Batman, we get too much Batman. It's Joker, we get too much Joker. Blend them together. I think my feelings about Batman Who Laughs are well known at this point, but he does exist, and whether I can't change that. So I do think he is actually a good choice for one of the villains here, along with Lex Luthor, and then this Dr. Sloan, who I'm not familiar with at all. I'm kind of assuming she comes from the world of Fortnite. I don't even know if
I'm assuming that too. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't even know if there's a backstory or what the backstory is for the Fortnite video game. So, again, there's a lot to like here. I think the art is spectacular, like you said, Rocky. Particularly the montage pages where we get the scene of Batman proposing. We get Catwoman in her old what is my favorite costume, the purple and with the green cape, which I love. We get her diving off the boat. It's just fantastic. So all in all, it sounds like we're going to get more Batman Zeropoint, and I hope it continues to sell really well, and I hope it pulls in more readers. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I hear you.
All right, up next we have Wonder Girl #2. This is from writer Joelle Jones. We have Joelle Jones and Adriana Melo as the artist, Jordi Belair on colors, Clayton Cowell does the letters. I sort of felt like this issue was a mess. The art is fantastic, from each of the covers, which are great, to the wonderful line work and color work of Jordi Belair and Joelle Jones and Jordi Belair. Joelle Jones line work, Jordi Belair color work, particularly the color work when Yara Flor is submerged under the water. But it feels like I don't know who Yara Flor is at all. It feels like, in a way, Joelle Jones doesn't know who Yara Flor is, and Yara Flor herself doesn't know. Like, it just felt so chaotic. I go back to talking about Crush and saying, well, I don't know if her characterization is accurate. I've read every Yara Flor story, and I don't know, this doesn't feel like the way she acted previously at all. Now, granted, all those other stories were in the future, and so maybe, this is her learning her way, but, from not knowing her own strength to kicking the drink cart out the side of the airplane, the whole issue just felt like a mess to me.
Yeah.
And then we get Eros, who is, basically Cupid, right? When we're talking about these gods. And you would think that Cupid would be pretty good with a bow and arrow, but somehow he manages to cut himself with the arrowhead, despite the fact that this guy's an immortal god and this is his weapon. Somehow he manages to cut himself right as the moment he sees Yara Flor. And even Eros himself is not immune to his own arrows, which just seems incredibly stupid. On top of him not being able to handle a bow and arrow, and then he sees Yara Flor, and now he's fallen in love. And I'm like, what? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for me. I thought it was dumb. I thought the whole narrative was a mess and choppy. And frankly, I expect more from Joelle Jones than this. In terms of telling a story, because I know she can tell a good story that makes sense. But here, it falls apart. It logically doesn't make sense. The characterization is choppy. The narrative is choppy. So it was gorgeous to look at, but I've gone back and forth on Yara Flor of not really being a fan of her. Some of the future state stories with her I thought were okay. Some I didn't enjoy so much. I thought the first issue of this was very intriguing, but a lot of those really interesting ideas in the first issue didn't get fleshed out here. Like, we know there are various different factions around the world that want Yara Flor not to be in Brazil, not to be in her homeland, because it's somehow portending the end of the world. And now they're all after her, and it feels very much like a MacGuffin hunt, and the MacGuffin is Yara Flor herself. But we're not getting enough of the why behind it other than in the first few pages. Like, I feel like the first few pages of this issue where she's underwater, I was filled with hope. I'm like, oh, this is really, really good. And then as soon as Yara Flor comes up out of the water, the story just falls apart. The narrative just, like I said, it just feels messy. And maybe with some more issues and with more pieces put into play, I'll look back on this and I won't be so harsh on it. But man, I was just really disappointed in this issue. But at least I had the great art and the great color work to kind of pull me through. But yeah, from the choppiness to that scene with Eros at the end, and I just kept like, really, this immortal god who's been using the bow and arrow for thousands and thousands of years cuts himself on the arrowhead, and he's not immune to falling in love. Like, Cupid is not immune to falling in love from one of his own arrows. Seriously? Yeah, I didn't like that at all. So I don't know. Maybe you had a better experience than me, Rocky. What'd you think?
I am actually going to agree with you here, and I'm going to be. I do hold out more hope that I think that this can improve. But where I think this story, where I think this fell apart is, it felt very, very much like Joelle Jones had very specific plot points. There was point A, B, C, D that had to happen, and she created a ridiculous series of events in order to get from A, B, C to D. Just to give an example, at the beginning here, she's actually in Iguacu Falls because she's visiting that Brazilian state of Parana in Brazil, Iguacu Falls, and she's pulled into the water, and the Iraru god hands her the bolo, which is basically her magic lasso. Okay, and then she comes out, and then for some godforsaken reason, her newfound interest there for some reason she wants to fly back to Rio, and that made no sense to me. I thought that she went to Brazil. I thought the whole point was to go to Brazil. She was there, but she needs to fly back to Rio. So why was she in Iguacu Falls to begin with? If she only after she comes out of the water, then the guy that was her bus driver, her tour bus driver, Joelle, his name is Joelle, which I think is almost a play on Joelle, the writer, but Joelle. I actually had Google pronounce me how to say his name. But in any event, he joins her on the flight back to Rio, from Iguacu Falls to Rio, in order to go to her hotel room in Rio. And I'm thinking, why on earth wouldn't you get a hotel room in the place you were going? It was so forced that she had to, in order to get the character from Iguacu Falls to Rio, okay, then you're flying back, and then they're on their plane, and then nonsensically, the Amazons, some of the Amazons, some of Bana Magdal tribe Amazons, suddenly appear on the plane, and they openly attack Yara, nonsensically. Why would you do that? Why not wait till the plane lands? Why would you attack her in the plane to endanger lives? I mean, I'm sure even the Queen Faruka of the Bana Magdal did not say, go get Yara or go kill Yara. And by the way, if you have to wipe out everyone on the plane, do that. It just seems so ridiculous. And then Yara herself just kicks a cart and literally kicks a hole in the plane, endangering, basically. I mean, how many people died on that plane? I mean, I guess we'll never know. We can just assume nobody because we want to be polite to Yara Flor. And we can maybe say, well, Yara doesn't know how her powers. I'm guessing, none of this is said in the narrative, I'm guessing that the longer Yara is in Brazil, I'm guessing is that the more powerful she's going to be becoming. So I think she's getting stronger and stronger while she's in Brazil. I'm guessing that because she doesn't seem to understand or appreciate her own strength. I'm reading that into this story, even though it's not entirely clear, it's strongly implied. But this crashes the plane, and she just happens to crash the plane right beside where Eros is, who is the grandson of Hera, who also wants to, I guess, kill Yara Flor. And of course, what are the odds of all the millions of years that he's been around that he happens to prick himself with his own arrow right at that moment when he sees Yara Flor? Everything seems so forced to me, and it just doesn't seem, it lacked a degree of verisimilitude. None of it really seemed to progress naturally to me. It did feel forced, and that's why it felt so choppy to me. And I was, again, this isn't, this can get better, but it does seem very forced to me, very choppy, and I'm a little bit, I don't mind Yara being hyper and being impulsive. But this was Yara being dangerous, stupid, and someone that maybe she should be recruited and placed on the suicide squad with a bomb in her head. Maybe that would calm her down and cause her to be more rational. But seriously, it's like she's going to have to really calm down here. I mean, she definitely has some flaws here. And I don't mind that. Jury's still out. But I think, Joelle Jones has to reel in some of her atrocious decision-making. Yara's really irresponsible behavior here. They really got to reel her in. And so in any event, there's a number of more things I can comment, but I will say this, there's kinetic energy here. There is a fun factor here. But it's sloppy. This is like sloppy fun, almost too sloppy. She's got to just reel it in a bit and streamline it because, and just one quick point, at one point when Artemis is talking to Queen Faruka tells Artemis that, oh, well, this is a small matter. Are you sure you want to get involved? And then literally in the next page, the other group of Amazons is talking about how this is going to be either bringing destruction to the Amazons or it's going to bring their salvation. Well, is it a big deal or isn't it? You got one queen saying to Artemis, well, this isn't a big deal. It's a small mission. Go take out Yara. But yet it's a very big deal. So there even seems to be contradictions in the story, in the importance of the main plot line itself. I hate to be so critical here, but I was really expecting a little bit more here. And my fingers are crossed that things are going to get better from here on in, but we shall see.
Yeah, I agree. The decision making because here's the thing. Like I talked about she's been a little inconsistent. Some of the future state stories with Yara Flor I liked, and some I didn't. I liked her in certain stories, or I was indifferent. I never disliked her. In this issue, when on the plane, when she's acting the fool, I actively disliked her.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to read about somebody who's this idiotic. Like it wasn't good. So if you're trying to endear people to these characters and get them to care about them, is not the way to do it. All right, up next is Green Lantern number 4, written by Geoffrey Thorne. We have art in the first half of the book by Tom Rainey, where we're on the planet of Oa, and then the second half, or I'm sorry, when we're out in space with John Stewart, it's by Tom Rainey, and then when we're back on Oa, the art is by Marco Santucci. Michael Atea does the colors. Rob Lee on letters. We're seeing more shades of a future state. So what did you think of this one, Rocky?
I thought this was, this is definitely leading into future state. This was a little bit frustrating in parts. I actually the part that annoyed me the most, there was a scene where Teen Lantern kept saying a bunch of stuff in Spanish, and I didn't know what she was saying, and I actually had to take 10 minutes to Google it. And in any event, this really just continues the story. We know that John Stewart is in this new sector of space, where this army, this armada of Quinari, they're responsible for attacking all the Green Lanterns in this dark sector. And out of the 1,000 Green Lanterns that are now part of this new Green Lantern Corps that are part of this dark sector, 300 of them have been essentially killed. The bounties have been fulfilled. The Quinaris are hunting down to take the rings from these Green Lanterns, which are trapped in the dark sector. And in this issue, they go after John Stewart with a vengeance, and John Stewart manages to defeat them and essentially utilize the take over their ship. And other than that, and while he's doing that, the Far Sector Green Lantern, along with Teen Lantern, are trying to figure out what to do, and they end up they decide that they're going to go check out Sinestro because they want to narrow down the suspects, because they ask themselves who has the power to destroy the central power battery, and they narrow it down to a number of people, and Teen Lantern insists that it's likely Sinestro, and she screams out in Spanish, "He's a monster, you know this, he did this, he hurt all these people, nobody is doing anything about it, well, I'm going to do something." And this Teen Lantern she's just as impulsive as Liara Floor, except she's 6 years younger, I think. So impulsiveness seems to be a trait of these new heroes of the DC universe. And overall, I mean, again, we're just moving closer to Future State. I thought the art was pretty good. I'm getting used to the art because it's not art that I normally associate with Green Lantern stories. I had to get used to it when it was in Future State. John Stewart is very good. I will say this about the scripting here. I like how John Stewart he's a very capable fighter even without his Green Lantern ring, and John befriends a stranger here, and he sets up a trap, and he creates a Faraday cage, which is an enclosure that blocks electromagnetic fields, which is quite clever. And he creates a trap, and writer Geoffrey Thorne here, I thought, was quite creative in how John Stewart did that. He's clearly showing John Stewart to be a very capable fighter even without his ring, and we saw that, of course, in Future State as well. And we saw in this issue ends with John Stewart essentially creating the same sort of, I think, electromagnetic field that takes out the weapons of the Quinari, and he becomes a hero of the people that he's helping. And ultimately, this will lead to the civil war that we saw in Future State, where ultimately the 700 remaining Lanterns will eventually unite to have one final battle against the Quinari in Future State. At least that's what I think. But I don't know. Am I getting that right, Jace?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it. And I will give Geoffrey Thorne some credit. Like during the Future State Green Lantern, I harped on the fact that John Stewart was going up against the Coons, this warrior race, and he, was outnumbered 1,000 to 1, and he was holding his own. At least in this issue against the Quinari, who are a similar race to the Kuns, at least Thorne takes the time to explain just how John Stewart is able to defeat them, and it makes sense and it works. We still understand that Geoffrey Thorne's a huge John Stewart fan, and he's definitely putting him in the most positive light here, but I didn't mind it. I did feel like it definitely made sense. And it's clear that Thorne is telling a big story here,
Yeah. No, it's true.
The scope of it is really big, is what I mean. But I do sort of feel a little bit like the whole idea of it is something that we've seen a lot recently. We saw it with Jeff Johns. We saw it with Robert Venditti. This whole idea of the core becoming powerless. It just feels like we've done this so much, and I kind of need something new. But maybe it's just, it's not for me, right? This is Geoffrey Thorne's first chance to write the Green Lantern characters, and he wants to tell the story he wants to tell. Clearly, he's a big fan, especially of John Stewart. So I get that. And maybe it's just a matter of I've been reading these characters too long now that I've started to see these patterns repeat themselves. So I'm more interested in what comes after, right? Not so much. So how are they going to recover? How are they going to prevent that Future State storyline from coming to pass? I'm more interested in, like, give me the stories about the Green Lantern Corps actually existing and out there trying to work alongside the United Planets and that sort of thing. To me, that would be more interesting than telling another story about the Green Lantern battery being destroyed and about them not having power and how do they get through that. I just feel like I've had that story a lot recently. But I don't know. I mean, overall, I thought the issue was solid. The first half is all about John Stewart and how he defeats these aliens without his power ring. And like I said, I think it worked. It all made sense with what Geoffrey Thorne gave us. And the Tom Rainey art here, I thought is some of the better art that he's done. We've been a little critical of his art in the past because I feel like his proportions on his bodies change from one panel to the next wildly. The second half of the story on Oa with Teen Lantern, I agree with you. It's annoying when she speaks Spanish and we don't have translation. I'm not sure what that's about. Can we just put the little brackets around it and give it to us in English and tell us she's speaking Spanish? Like, I don't understand the reason for that. Like, are you trying to teach us to speak Spanish? I feel like I'm kind of long in the tooth to be learning another language. Was never very good at languages in the first place, and that's coming from somebody. I'm half Hispanic myself. That was always the way my grandparents would talk behind our backs, like right in front of us, so we wouldn't know what they're saying because we couldn't speak Spanish.
Well, not only that, the funny thing is that was actually, I think that it was obviously intentional by writer Geoffrey Thorne here, because normally the Green Lantern rings will automatically translate, but it's a plot point that the translation matrix is screwed up mechanism, and therefore that's why she's yelling and screaming in Spanish, but I mean she's told to speak in English. But still, it was still a little bit. It was intentional. So I mean, so I can be forgiving, but it was still. I did find it annoying. There's nothing more annoying than when, a plot point's revealed and it's in another language, and I missed it because I just assume. I always assume if something's in a different language in a comic, it's not important. But that's wrong sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And then the predictable parts of the second half of the story, let's go once again with, the most obvious. So it's either Sinestro or the Red Lanterns or the Controllers or the Bright Circle, who at least that's a new villain group. So hopefully it's actually the Bright Circle and not Sinestro. Because can we have a disaster befall the Green Lantern Corps and not have the Yellow Lanterns or Sinestro be behind it? Again, that would be a little more refreshing, and I don't need to talk anymore about my feelings on Teen Lantern. It's a Bendis character, so that pretty much tells you everything you need to know, in my mind. But maybe in the hands of Geoffrey Thorne, she can be redeemed somewhat. So again, this book it's better than I expected based on the first issue and based on the future state stuff we got from Geoffrey Thorne. It has been a solid book, and I'm still on board, but this was not. And I think issues 2 and 3 were better. This was better than issue 1, but issues 2 and 3 were better than this one. Didn't get a whole lot of plot momentum in this one. A lot of exposition and a chance for John Stewart to shine, basically. So, all right, on to the last book we're going to talk about. And Rocky and I both were very impressed by the first issue of this series. It's The Nice House on the Lake from writer James Tynion. Alvaro Martinez Bueno handles the artwork. Jordi Belair does colors, and World Design does the letters. And once again, I'll say thank God for Justice League Dark when it relaunched the most recent version. James Tynion was the writer, and Alvaro Martinez Bueno was the artist. And so it's clear that from them working together on that, they co-created this Nice House on the Lake, which is a Black Label series, kind of about the end of the world. And my, oh my, is it absolutely fantastic. I do feel like the first issue was much more impactful in terms of just this big reveal at the end. So just to give a quick background, this person who we thought was just a regular guy who'd grown up with a lot of different really close friends, invited all those friends to come to this lake house. And some friends he had made in high school, some he had made in college, some he'd made in while he was working in his work career. and the people didn't know, like they didn't all necessarily know each other, and they didn't know why they were being invited, but it was this incredible house. And then come to find out, in the course of the first issue, we find out this guy's some sort of alien, and apparently his people, as he calls them or refers to them as, decide that the Earth isn't, or the people of Earth aren't really worth saving or don't deserve to live, and they basically set the rest of the planet on fire. Like, skin is literally melting off of people. It is Armageddon. It is the apocalypse. It is the end of the world. And only this little pocket, this house on this lake with its gorgeous views, and it's a very modern house with all the amenities, and even though the rest of the world's falling apart, even their Wi-Fi still works, Twitter and all that sort of thing. And he reveals himself. Hey, this is what's happening. This is why I brought you here, because I love you all and I care for you, and you're going to get to survive the end of the world, basically. And so it was a real kind of holy crap moment, big reveal in the first issue. And so that was a little bit more impactful. This issue is, we're starting to see the fallout. How does this affect these people? How do they deal with it? They're all sort of in shock. And so we're starting to get a little bit of characterization and character dynamic. We get a few more things revealed. A couple of the characters go on kind of an exploration of the house, and they find some conventional weapons. They find a spa that includes a deprivation tank. Like, there's a lot of questions still to be answered, but this issue feels a little bit more like, okay, we got the big setup in the first issue, and now let's slowly start to build the characterization and the story and the drama and the tension, because regardless of how equipped the house is, and clearly there's some sort of high-level technology that's so advanced to the point of seeming to be like magic. It's mentioned at one point, like, well, am I going to run out of cigarettes? No, because you'll smoke what you have in your pack, and then every time you go back to your room, there'll be a fresh pack on your nightstand or what have you, And again, it's all from these aliens and this advanced technology, but that kind of thing to us at our level of technology feels like magic, right? But no matter how advanced this house is and how many of the need, anything these people could want or need for their survival, if it's all provided for them, that's great. There's still the idea of every other person that all your loved ones is gone. Every place you've ever been in your life, everywhere, your hometown, wherever you traveled, went to school, whatever, it's all gone. Society is gone. Religion is gone. Maybe some cabin fever will set in. And even if not, there's that level of trauma, and they all have a finite life. They'll have a finite lifespan as far as we know. They haven't become immortal. This is going to take a toll, and regardless of whether this person, this Walter, who said that he loves them and wanted to save them, and only them, despite the rest of the world going up in flames, at some point, I got to think you're going to want to give up, or you're going to want to lash out, or it's going to drive you like literally insane. This is not some kind of normal situation that I think our human psyche is equipped to handle. I mean, this is unprecedented events and trauma. And I got to imagine that, I could see these people turning on each other, at least some of them, because like I said, it's not like they're all friends. They don't all know each other. Some of them are strangers. And so I expect, now that we got that big impactful first issue with the setup, and now we're going to a slow burn where Tynion and Bueno are going to build up the tension and build up the story. And I don't expect this story, I don't expect a happy ending. I don't expect time to somehow be turned back and the world to come back, or maybe I'm wrong and these people are all under a mass hypnosis and the world is still going on out there. But what I do know is it's masterful storytelling. It's extremely compelling. The character work, the art, everything works together in the narrative very, very well to tell a really, really interesting story, and I can't wait to see where it goes. What were your thoughts on this, Rocky?
I was really fascinated by the character of Walter, this human / this alien who, it's Walter who has created this cluster of his friends, the New York cluster, the high school cluster, and the college cluster, all ranges in the ages in their early 30s. And he's put together a group of all his friends over the years. And he, as you said, he's brought him to this nice house on the lake while the rest of the earth is essentially destroyed. And what I found the way this issue was structured, I thought it started off quite interesting because the pianist named Rick, because each one has a name. Each character has a name. There's the comedian, the scientist, the writer, the accountant, artist, reporter, acupuncturist, doctor, pianist. Well, Rick, the pianist, he's narrating it, and he talks about what it was like when he first met Walter. And he describes Walter, somebody who you get a sense that Walter was very insecure. And even in school, Walter was somewhat insecure and maybe fearful of the future and wasn't sure what the future held. And you get a sense that Walter, of course, knew exactly that at some point the world, that the planet Earth would be destroyed. And you get a sense that maybe Walter, Earth was his assignment. And yet while he's there, he's meeting all these friends and he's almost having these reservations. And I guess I'm just speculating, but James Tynion has done a really good job here of making me want to be in Walter's head. Imagine if you're an alien and you're stationed on a planet that you know is going to die, but you grow to love that planet and love its peoples, and you get friends, and you had the capability and the technology to create literally a nice house on the lake for your friends to live for eternity or for the rest of their lives while they're doing it. One interesting little tidbit here is I found it interesting that Walter actually did come up with a 7-day schedule. And at the end of the schedule, the schedule is from June 14th to Sunday, June 20th. And on day 7, the last thing that it says is Walter's farewell speech. So at some point, Walter is going to give a farewell speech. And what's going to happen then? Are they, so at some point, is Walter going to leave and then they're all going to stay? And it's interesting. And, even the statues, one of the statues around the building that they discovered is that if they touch this strange looking statue, they can see their loved one's final moments. And if this is such a great place, why would there be places that are so horrifying? Like, why would a statue be on this beautiful place where you touch it and it shows you your loved one's dying last horrific moments? So on the surface, while this does cater to their wildest dreams as a perfect permanent holiday, at the same time, there are aspects of this perfect house on the lake that are quite horrifying. And as you said, they found a deprivation tank, and there's another group. In fact, it's I think it's Nora and Sarah end up checking out the library, and they find guns and weapons, and Walter recruits Rick, Rick the pianist, and Nea the doctor, and Nea and Rick are lovers, and he sort of recruits them because Walter is even expecting that some of the group might betray him, and so he's already creating factions. So this is almost like a horror version of Survivor, and it's very interesting. And like I said, very well done by Tynion so far, really whetting the appetite. I'm so looking forward to the 3rd issue. Just amazing, man. I mean, horror is definitely his genre. Between this and Something Is Killing the Children, man, he's really finding his stride.
Yeah, I agree 100%. This is maybe my favorite thing he's ever done to this point, so fantastic. All right, in addition to these books that we talked about this week, there's also Batman, The Adventure Continues, Season 2, Number 2. There is a Justice League Infinity Number 1 title from writer J.M. DeMatteis that continues stories and narratives and plot threads from the Justice League Unlimited cartoon. There is, speaking of horror, there's the DC Horror Presents The Conjuring, The Lover, Number 2. So there's a few other books out this week from DC, but that's all we're going to cover on this particular spotlight. And for me, if I could only recommend one DC book this week, it would definitely be Nice House on the Lake Number 2, assuming you read the first one. If not, I was really impressed with Batman Secret Files: The Signal, surprisingly enough. I thought that was spectacular as well. So
yeah, I really enjoyed Suicide Squad number 5. I love the fact that Bloodsport there encountering Ultraman on Earth 3. I thought that was great, and how I think it expands the potential for future Suicide Squad recruitment. I thought that was really great. And I do want to give a shout out to Justice League Infinity number 1. I'm a huge fan of Justice League animated cartoon, and I was actually hoping we could maybe review it, but that's all right. But I do want to say a quick word about it if I can, Jace. Justice League Infinity is a really great story. I loved it because it brings in, it hints at all the Batman and Wonder Woman romance that was in the animated cartoon. It hints at the love triangle between Hawkgirl, Jon Stewart, and Vixen. Hawkgirl's jealousy is coming back because those of you who followed the continuity of the cartoon and Justice League animated into the Justice League United cartoon, all of those continuities, all those storylines are alive and well in Justice League Infinity. This deals with Amazo trying to find a new sense of sort of enlightenment, and this deal, it's so much happens in this issue. It's really good. It deals with it has Granny Goodness, a Big Barda. The themes in Justice League Infinity are really well. DeMatteis does a really great job. Amazo is searching for answers to his existence. Martian Manhunter is searching for his identity. Granny Goodness and Calabac, there's a civil war that's occurring on Apocalypse, because this takes place after the final cartoon called Justice League Destroyer, the final episode of the Justice League cartoon where Darkseid leaves Apocalypse. So right now nobody's ruling Apocalypse. I got to tell you, man, for fans of the Justice League animated, please pick up Justice League Infinity. This is really starting off a real cool storyline. I think it's really good, and in fact, it's actually my personal favorite of the week, ironically enough, just because I love the cartoon so much. But anyways, I want to give a shout out to that. So.
Yeah, the style very much, as far as the art goes, is very much an animation.
I own all the maquettes. I own all the statues down there. I got all the statues of the Justice League animated, all the limited edition statues and everything. So I'm like a huge fan. So I'm definitely biased. So
fantastic. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Anything you got coming up this week you want to shout out, Rocky?
Not specifically. If I do, it's probably going to be more of a surprise. In fact, now I probably will. I might even do a full scale review of Justice League Infinity and talk about the Destroyer of some of the cartoons that led into it. Since we didn't cover it fully here, so I'll probably do that. And I'm pretty busy at work this week, but we'll see. I'll always come up with something. What about yourself?
Yeah,
Any interviews?
I don't really. Day job is crazy right now, and I've got some other projects going on, so nothing that I can shout out specifically for this week. But I will mention to everybody, Ordinary Gods #1 from Kyle Higgins comes out this week on Wednesday. Highly, highly recommend it. And if you want to know more about it, go listen to my interview with him last week about it. It's a fantastic issue, fantastic story, and another great comic from Kyle Higgins. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. So.
All right.
I think that's going to do it, everybody. As always, want to thank you for watching or listening. If you're just checking out the audio version on the podcast, be sure you head over to YouTube, the Comic Space Boom ! channel that Rocky has, where he puts out a ton of great content. So be sure you're smashing that subscribe button. Hit the like button on this video. Make sure you click that notification bell so you find out when he has new content coming out. Conversely, if you're over on YouTube and you want more comic content, be sure you're subscribing to the Comic Source on whatever favorite podcast platform. That's the word I'm looking for, podcast. Your favorite podcast platform. We're on all of them, or just whatever podcast app you use on your iPhone or whatnot. So you're sure not to miss any of our reviews. A reminder that our Wednesday new comic book episode is always spoiler free, as opposed to this DC Spotlight where we dive in depth. So we appreciate your support and for joining us as always, and we'll talk to you next time.
See you later.